Kate Mila Falcha, welcome back to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome, Larry Jordan, returning favorite, back to continue our discussion of his book, The Real Marilyn Monroe. And if you haven't watched video number 1 of this particular set of discussions, we are looking at the last year of her life. We just finished. We have now gotten in the chronology up to the last week of her life. So thank you, Larry, for joining us. And you had something you wanted to show everybody.
Well, I wanted to explain for the benefit of people who have not yet watched the first video we just did.
Yeah.
That, of course, for months we've been talking about this book, which is 768 pages.
I know. I'm getting biceps from picking.
I noticed that. It's great for working out. Anyway, 768 pages. And I realize that there are some people that feel they don't have the time to read it. And there's also those who maybe are not all that interested in Marilyn, but they are interested in what happened to her. So I just released a few days ago this book, which is about half the size as the original, and it concentrates on Marilyn's last months. So what you saw in the first book, you can find pretty much in this one. If you're only interested in the latter part of her life and what happened to her, you can acquire this book. It's half the number of pages. It's 6 by 9, and of course it doesn't cost as much. There are some rare photos that are in this book throughout the book, and one that is probably of note among others is there's a picture of Marilyn prior to the autopsy. And this is something that I have not seen in any other book. I don't think I've seen it in any other book. And it's my answer to the appalling decision of another major author who published a very bad photo of Marilyn after.
Why would anybody want to look at autopsy photos?
I don't know.
That's weird.
And this one is not an autopsy photo. It's taken before the autopsy.
So. Before we start, just in case people don't realize this, we're being kind of coy about names and some specific details, but I'm sure you'll figure out what we're talking about. And anything that we talk about here is backed up by proof. We're not speculating. And you're going to hear opposing stories, bizarre versions. This is the stuff that is based on actual factual evidence. So keep that in mind. If you go somewhere else and you hear contradictory information, you can come back to this book to get the absolute definitive word, because everything Larry put in it, he backed it up. He had, as the kids say, he has the receipts. So I'm staying relevant.
You know, Helen, I once told you that I don't read fiction, even though my beloved daughter is not only a hard news reporter and feature writer, Sarah Elizabeth Knights, she also writes fiction, and she can't even get me to read her fiction books. I just don't like fiction. So you can damn well bet I'm not putting fiction in my book on him.
No, I think you have a high standard for integrity, and I appreciate that, because this topic is enormously bankable if you manipulate it, right? I mean, there's a lot of money to be made off of the really difficult life that Marilyn Monroe had and off her reputation. It's really quite tragic, and I'm not coming into this as a diehard Marilyn Monroe fan. Not really crazy about a number of her movies, simply because they're very dated, and gendered. I love her, and I didn't know I would, but I have a lot of respect for her as an individual. Not a lot of people in Hollywood who had integrity, and she did, even though her sexual mores were more liberal than the time she lived in. I don't judge people by that. I don't care, consenting adults, right?
I'm not sure that she was all that out of the ordinary in the movie colony. That's
no.
Years and years and years. Back in the talkie days, or before the talkies.
Well, they think they invented infidelity. So yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's be serious here. Yeah, like I said, at the end of the last video. You know, I'm on page 3 of my notes. We're not making sterling progress here. It's such an interesting story, but it's just a rabbit hole. There's so much. So we're on the last week, and leading up to her death, which some people want to ascribe to self-harm from being involved with substances, being heartbroken, having no future in her career. A variety of different things allegations are made. So I just want to very, very quickly just read this brief, not complete accounting of her last week. She was shopping for her new house she had just bought that she was having done. She was getting fitted for a gown for a big September event in Washington, D.C. I think it was a charity. She was doing her own landscaping and had orders coming from nurseries. She was in therapy. Unfortunately, this might have been part of her undoing, that she was in increased amount of therapy with her doctors. She had plans. She just talked to Gene Kelly about making a movie with him called something about Louisa.
Yes, that's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. She had arranged to have a big barbecue on Sunday, August 5th. She'd ordered food for it. So all this stuff was going on, and we'll talk about more stuff that happened in the 2 or 3 days leading up to her death that would indicate engagement in the larger world and the future.
Oh, yes.
But it begs to be said, we have to remind people that contrary to what a lot of us want to believe, we could know if somebody was in despair. Self-harm can be a spur of the moment decision. It doesn't have to come from, there are not necessarily signs. People sometimes do it impulsively. And we have to be very careful talking about this topic, YouTube, but you all know what the allegations are that happened to her from her own decision, and nothing could be farther from the truth. I'm tying myself into knots here, trying not to use certain words. It's insanity. So we're at August 2nd, Thursday, August 2nd. And she had there's a story that's not true about her having a conversation with Dorothy Kilgallen. You want to talk about that?
Oh my. There is a so-called CIA memo that has been interpreted several different ways by several different authors. And cutting to the chase, that memo is a hoax. And I know it's a hoax because the guy that brought it forth admitted in writing it was a hoax. I identify him by name in both books and even the date he did this. So any author either should know it's a hoax or they know it's a hoax and they're deceiving their readers. So we can completely dismiss that.
And the allegations were that she had plans to call a press conference
Right.
and blow the whistle on these important high-placed politicians she was involved
with. And I don't think there's anything about Marilyn's life that angers me more than to see the constant repetition of that fraudulent story. It originated from Bob Slater, who was a Hollywood scriptwriter, a shady character who was roommates with Ron Pataki, the unofficial suspect in the death of
Dorothy Kilgallen. Isn't that interesting?
And Bob Slater jumped on the bandwagon, and I think basically he was a double agent. He melted down in public, and so the things that he said that were actually accurate, and very few of them were, just collapsed, and people discounted everything he said just because he ended up being a freak show. He ended up having somebody from the Church of Satan involved with him. And all of this is in a book, and he's treated with credibility by successive books. And it's just shocking to me. But anyway, Marilyn,
that relationship, though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that relationship, I think, is a perfect example of how this story is just a knot. Dorothy Kilgallen's last boyfriend, who is a suspiciously involved perhaps in what happened to her, is a roommate with this guy who started the story about.
Yeah, and
yeah, it
And they
blows the mind.
reinforced each other, and I'd go into that sometime also.
Right.
But the bottom line is that you can't believe much of anything you've read about the last days. Marilyn, I just want to digress for a brief second and say that Marilyn's been portrayed by some authors as alone, reclusive, depressed, turning in the wind over her angst about the breakup of these
A scorned woman.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, first of all, no one but me has come out with the fact that Lee and Paula Strasberg rented a beach house in Santa Monica that summer, and they were there. She was not alone. She had her own support system right there in town, and they were there. They even held a big party on July 4th, at which many Hollywood figures attended. So, the whole month, I basically day by day tell what she was doing. She was very busy, and she was making plans for the fall.
Making
But
a lot of plans. And there are phone records to back up a lot of this. So on
yeah,
August 2nd, Thursday still, she had a verified phone call with Marlon Brando. And they
yeah,
were discussing doing a film together. And later he talked in depth about it. He said she seemed stable and calm and happy and upbeat and not depressed, taking charge of her life. And he told Ileana Douglas, now this is the name of somebody I've mentioned before. This is the granddaughter of Melvyn Douglas. Melvyn Douglas played the lawyer, accountant to Cary Grant in Mr. Blanding Builds His Dream House, one of my favorite movies, hilarious movie. Ileana Douglas was his granddaughter. Well, still his granddaughter. Is an actress and does character parts. And she was told by Brando Marilyn was done away with.
yes,
There's a phone record of her calling the Strasbergs and having a very heated conversation with them. And right afterwards, she hung up and she made an appointment for the 6th to change her will.
yeah.
I'm going to talk about that. I think that might have been like some fuel on the fire there.
Well, Ralph Roberts and Pat Newcomb are in agreement that last period of her life, Marilyn was really taking charge.
Mm-hmm.
Even the investigators said that she had reduced her intake of medication. She was turning over a whole new leaf. She was really agitated by Greenson's involvement with the studio. And that was unfolding over a period of months. And she grew more and more irate about him, such that she started to consult once again Margaret Hohenberg, who was her first psychiatrist in New York. She was consulting with her by a long distance phone, which is another indication that Greenson's days were numbered. Okay. And I mentioned that Paula Strasberg and Lee Strasberg were out there in California, but she was also withdrawing from them as well. They had done a couple of things that I chronicle in my book that she was not happy about, went behind her back on a few things.
Well, they were behind her back to establish an LA version of their studio, right?
Well, that was part of it, but it's farther than that. But we have to mention the significant point here was that there was a point that was a turning point that July 13th when Daryl Zanuck returned once again to the helm of 20th Century Fox and ousted 3 members of the board who were cronies of the family, who were basically corporate raiders trying to run that studio.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's be clear, not the family from like the Southern Mediterranean,
No,
but the family from Massachusetts. Okay.
Right. And it was also signaled to Marilyn that she was going to be rehired after an 18-day period in which she was badly beat up and lied about in the press as the reason for the shutdown of the studio. By the way, some of the people that were quoted, like Sid Charisse and others, and Weinberg, the producer, later said, I never made those statements. Mm-hmm. 20th Century Fox was issuing statements over the names of these individuals being critical of Marilyn. But anyway, Peter Levites, who is the guy that officially fired her, former Eisenhower and solid Republican guy, made a pilgrimage. He made 3 pilgrimages to Marilyn's house. And the last one he did, he brought a revised script. So it is absolutely true that Marilyn had been rehired. They
Mhm.
hadn't signed formally the contract, but everybody knew it, including her stand-in, including everybody involved with the filming. She
Well,
had
Dean
actually,
Martin, he was
I
behind
was
her,
going to
wasn't he?
say,
Yeah.
she went and visited Dean Martin's house. I have an account of that on July 25th. And they knew that this was, going to happen. She had summoned Paula Strasberg back because the Strasbergs had been in California at the beach house. Then they left to go to Italy for a big event over there that involved a lot of theatrical people. But then Marilyn summoned her back to come home early because she knew she was going to get this revised script. And even though she was going to part ways with Paula, maybe she wasn't quite sure she would, but she ended up doing that. She had Paula fly back early, put her up in an expensive hotel room, and Paula conferred with her. And it was conferring with her that last weekend that Marilyn was alleged to have been at Calneva, and I set that record straight. She was not there. She was at the Calneva Lodge 2 weeks before. And I go into all the solid documentation of that. So that last week of Marilyn's life, she was very busy. She had conferred that last weekend with Paula Strasberg, then put about the script, the new script that Peter Levithes had just handed her. And then she put Paula on a plane on that Monday of that week. Then the rest of the week, Marilyn visited with her publicist. She reviewed the work of a director she was interested in hiring, being part of her upcoming film. She was busy every single day.
Yeah, I'm definitely making plans. And just as an aside, props to Dean Martin when she had the big conflict and the movie kind of pre-planning fell apart over the script. He walked in defense of her, right? And
Yes.
and he did come back. He was her co-star, and he did come back
Yeah.
when things got ironed out. But he was very supportive of her. She met with him and talked with him. She also had a visit from her friend Whitey.
Yes, Whitey Snyder
Makeup, or was he hair? Makeup.
and his fiancee.
Yeah.
Yes, he was
And he
actually
said,
he was actually married at the time, but we'll call her the fiancee because he ended up getting divorced and did marry this other woman,
oh, okay.
who was a wardrobe mistress that Marilyn knew and liked a lot.
But
But
they
they
said
were-
that she was as happy as they'd ever seen her. Now, this would
Yes.
be Thursday, August 2nd.
Yes.
Her
Now,
friend
there-
Ralph, who was the masseuse, and he used to come. I had a trouble keeping track of in the book, as I was doing this. Wait, I thought he came the other day. I guess he came every day and gave her a massage.
Pretty
just about
much.
every day.
And there's a story that was embraced again in a recent article I read, told by Dick Livingston, that Marilyn had been at the Lawford residence on Thursday night, drank not one, but 2 bottles of champagne, and was popping pills. And we know that's a damnable lie
Yeah.
because Ralph Roberts was with her Thursday night, gave her a massage. He had been house sitting for Imogene Coca, who was a very dear friend. Imogene had a wonderful house in the Hollywood Hills, and Ralph had been teasing Marilyn that he could get out a spyglass, which they sometimes call it, but a telescope, and see the swimming pool from that elevation. But Maureen Stapleton, her husband, and her 2 children had paid a visit, they were all friends, to Ralph, who was staying in Imogene Coca's house. And Ralph liked to cook, and he was grilling steaks, and they were going to watch TV, watch the sunset. And then the phone rings, and it's Marilyn, who asks if she can get a massage. And of course, Ralph explained he was with Maureen Stapleton. She says, "No, go ahead. We'll still be here when you get back." So Ralph did. He interrupted the dinner a little bit. I guess they'd already eaten at that point. Went over to Marilyn's, and he tucked Marilyn in, basically.
Yeah, interesting
And
relationship.
he talked about her mood, her great mood. And by the way, when he gave her the massage, she had a key. He could enter her home. She never locked her bedroom door, and you know why? Because it would not lock.
Yeah, I
Sherry
know. That
Redmond
comes
had sent a memo complaining that none of the interior doors of her house would lock. And an author said, "Oh, but a locksmith came out to the house. That's true. And I have the receipt from the locksmith, and he worked on a lock for a filing cabinet and a different exterior door. Did not touch her
Bedroom door. Yeah.
And Linda Nunez, whose family bought the house, said those doors didn't lock. That Marilyn's door would not lock. Keep that in mind when
Keep that in mind when we get to that
all
point.
stories that she locked herself in a bedroom and they had to break the glass to get into it.
Yeah, that's the whole story.
Bottom line is that Marilyn was not at that house, the Peter Lawford house on Thursday night prior to her demise. That's a made-up story.
And Ralph Roberts, who was with her, said that she had plans, and I think it's worthwhile, the plans he mentioned, beyond what I mentioned earlier. She was in the works with Billy Wilder, the director, about a movie. And I Love Louise was the name of the movie with Gene Kelly. She was scheduled to do an Esquire photo shoot.
In New York.
She had a trip planned to Mexico to buy more decorations for her house. Mm-hmm. She was working with Sinatra on a new film. She got an offer to be.
He had been on tour, and when he got back into town, they met for dinner. And he said that Essex Productions, which was his production company, would love to produce her 2 movies. And guess who was going to co-star with her?
I don't know.
Frank Sinatra.
Oh,
they talked about that. And one of them, I'll have to reread my book. I don't remember it off the top of my head. There was I Love Louisa, but there was another one that the premise was the character she played would be a woman who kept marrying guys and they kept dying after she married
it's a remake of My Favorite Husband or something
like that.
Yeah.
And it would have been, he thought it would be great chemistry. He even said that publicly. So we're not speculating on this. This was in public print at the time.
Was it Myrna Loy was in the original? Who was in the original?
You'd have to ask Sarah, who's the ultimate.
She's great to talk. I mean, and I can't remember my own name, let alone who's in the movie. Okay, so she got an offer to do a Broadway play. Jack Benny wanted her to appear in a show in Vegas.
Yes, $55,000 a week, which is contrasted with the $100,000 she was due to be paid for the duration of filming this latest film.
And that's the other thing, she was getting together with Dean Martin, So
right, and I think it's really critical we interject that she had a showdown with the studio.
Yeah.
And she showed up wearing a pair of glasses, looked like a secretary, very conservative. She stared down these executives who tried to get her to sign a mea culpa letter admitting she was the cause of their delays. She shoved it up, and she walked out of there with basically a contract that was worth a huge amount of money. I'll have to look that up again. I think it was worth $500,000 instead of $100,000.
Yeah.
So she
and a number of movies.
And by that point, they were already under pressure. Zanuck, she had flown to New York at one point. I have it in the book, and met secretly with Zanuck, who had been overseas making the longest day, but he was concerned what was happening. He was alarmed about what was happening, and they're firing Marilyn. He made a secret trip to New York, but he did turn up in a column, and I cite the columnist, saying, it kind of spilled the beans that he was in New York. Marilyn flew out there and they had a little tete-a-tete. So she knew he was going to be returning her to the payroll.
Yeah.
As did Peter Levithi. So that writing was on the wall. So all of these things were falling in place. She was on cloud 9.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I might be remembering the wrong studio. But wasn't this the studio of which 3 board members were affiliates of Old Joe?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And they were trying to get her
chairman of the board.
Yeah.
And their objective was to raid the studio and get it into such a precarious financial situation. It would be forced to sell the land underneath the studio.
And that was the goal, was to get their hands on that land.
And they started doing that because when the studio was founded, originally Daryl Zanuck was one of the original founders. It was sitting kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, well, LA was dirt streets. It was a cow town.
Absolutely. And it grew up around it. And all of a sudden the real estate became very, very, worthwhile.
Valuable. Yeah.
There was also oil under that land. And I previously alluded to the fact that there was a well-known family, and one of their family members was named Ethel, and her family was involved in transactions so that the sale of that property would have accrued to that benefit.
Oh, I was thinking of the wrong family. I related by marriage to the brothers. Correct?
Well, it is related by marriage, but
That's
this
what I'm
woman
asking.
named Ethel was related by marriage.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking of,
But she grew up very wealthy, and her
yes,
family had involvement with big companies,
yeah,
including Alcoa.
corporations,
And
yeah.
the sale of this, a lot of this was in line to benefit her family.
I've been reading a lot about old Hollywood, and when you said that first name, I thought of the Barrymores. Wait a minute, wrong family, wrong family. Okay, so August 3rd, this is Friday. All these media rumors were circulating. You cite a number of places and people.
What date did you say it was?
August 3rd.
August 3rd, yes.
But all these media rumors that she was dating a nationally famous gentleman.
Well,
so
it started on It started on Thursday with a oblique reference in Earl Wilson's column, which people seem to have missed. I have it in my books. And
yeah,
he talked about her going
over some of the details.
her going on a fabulous date with a very well-known gentleman, blah blah blah. That started, people wondering.
Yeah.
And by the way, Dorothy Kilgallen had previously talked about the after party following the Madison Square Garden event, in which she sang "Happy Birthday" to a big chief executive of the nation, and the AG danced with Marilyn 5 times. So automatically, readers of that column, and Dorothy was syndicated via Hearst, so she reached millions and millions of readers.
Yeah.
So they would have known when she, on Friday, August 3rd, came out with the whole thing about don't count Marilyn out. She's proved very alluring to a man who's much bigger than Joe DiMaggio was in her heyday. And out in California, they are circulating some photographs that show Marilyn wearing a skirt that Paris fashion designers would never have approved of because of its length. But anyway, and that was actually a photo that had been sent to her for basically blackmail and leverage purposes after her visit to the Calneva Lodge 2 weeks earlier. That's for another chat.
Sanity. So I have a question. The AG goes to California with his family, more northerly, not in LA.
Yes.
Did his older brother ask him to go talk to her?
Well, he was scheduled to speak to a group, a bar association group, in San Francisco on Monday, August 6th. So that was pre-planned for a while. And there were press reports leading up to that. So that wasn't really spontaneous. But it was certainly happenstance that those two columnists wrote what they did Thursday and Friday. And I might point out that the man in the White House at that time was a speed reader. And his wife said that he was reading 5,000 words a minute, which is a little faster than most people. And so he devoured morning newspapers. And New York newspapers were flown down pre-dawn because most of those morning papers were run by midnight or 2 a.m. They put them not just the newspaper that Dorothy appeared in, the Journal American, but also the New York Times, New York Post, and so forth. They put them on an airplane and fly them down to Washington. So when, official Washington woke up and had breakfast, they could see the New York papers. So definitely by Friday morning, they knew that Dorothy had written what she did about the AG, and of course, that raised red flags on the heels of the Earl Wilson thing. And by the way, the occupant of the White House was especially interested in gossip. So you can be sure he read the gossip column.
Well, who isn't,
Well,
so you're saying that the AG had official business in California, and his brother said, while you're over there, go down to LA and show.
Well, I don't even think it took a prodding from the brother, but no doubt the brother talked about it with him, because here's a little telltale sign that's very revealing. The newspaper account in the San Francisco Chronicle noted that the AG arrived with his wife and 4 of their children at the San Francisco airport on Friday afternoon, and that he was looking glum. He didn't have his usual flashing smile. And there's a photograph of him looking distracted and sullen and serious. But he was going on vacation. Most people are kind of joyous about that, right? But he wasn't. He had other things on his mind. And a Mr. Bates, who was a longtime friend of the family, they tried to hire him for the Justice Department, but he declined. He was their host at his ranch, miles south of San Francisco. And supposedly, the Aegean family spent from Friday to Sunday at the ranch. And there are pictures of the AG horseback riding, swimming, playing tennis. The trouble is, that doesn't constitute any proof that he was there for the duration of the
There's
week. He
no
could have done those
dating.
in
Yeah.
2 hours or less for photographic purposes. And Mr. Bates said that when the AG arrived, the topic of conversation yet on Friday night was about Marilyn Monroe. He let the cat out of the bag on that.
And he did have access to military transportation, air
Yes.
transportation. He very easily could get back and forth with no record, no official.
He landed at LAX. He was transported by helicopter, which he
Helicopter to
always
Santa
was, to
Monica.
the 20th Century Fox studio. I named the name of the guard that saw him get out of
Yeah.
the helicopter and get picked up by Peter Lawford, who he was related to. And the timetable put him at Marilyn's house roughly around 4 o'clock that Saturday afternoon. But I may be getting ahead of our story. On Friday yet.
Yeah, there's more.
Want to talk about Friday? Go ahead.
I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So they're seeing all this publicity that they do not want, for obvious reasons. But did they also figure out Sinatra's relationship to Giancana? And did that make her more of a personal threat?
No. They knew about Sinatra's relationship when he was campaigning for the guy for president.
Yeah, and
he was
working with their father.
Well, as a matter of fact, somebody actually wrote into Dorothy Kilgallen. It's in Sarah's book called The Incredible Life and Mysterious Death. Isn't that what it's called? Of Dorothy Kilgallen?
Yeah.
And I got it
can't
right
reach
here.
I've got it back here. I can't reach
I get paid $5 by Sarah every time I write it. But anyway,
You're welcome, Sarah.
She owes me. But anyway, she reports in that book that Dorothy Kilgallen entertained a letter to her from somebody that was ticked off about, Sinatra fraternizing with the president. And she kind of defended the president, said, he won. He can befriend anybody he wants. And she reviewed the fact that the friendship between the two men went back years.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew who he was. I mean, there was no revelation. The big thing that ticked them off was his manipulation of Pat Lawford for his own ends. That's what did upset.
There's so many reasons for them to be annoyed that it's hard to keep track. And she had hinted on the phone a couple of times to people over this last week that she wanted to talk about something, but she didn't want to talk about it over the phone. And I don't believe that she was going to be making threats to be, I guess we'd call it a whistleblower, holding a press conference. I don't think it was that. What do you think that she was concerned about?
I can answer that very simply. I want to be as emphatic. I will refrain from shouting when I say this.
Okay.
But it really raises my blood pressure when I hear people embrace the idea that Marilyn was going to hold a press conference.
Yeah, no.
Said in the previous interview, it was a hoax story promulgated by Bob Slater.
Yeah, that weird.
And picked up on and so forth. Marilyn had no history of vengefulness. Reporters who interviewed her during her lifetime, while she was still alive, even noted she harbored no bitterness. They couldn't even get her to talk about her ex-husband.
She was really very gracious about people. She didn't
discreet,
gossip.
and
Yeah.
she was an expert at deflecting questions she didn't want to answer.
Yeah.
And she did it succinctly and with humor. And for God's sakes, people have to grasp by now, this woman was committed, heart and soul, to her career. Do you think this woman is so ignorant that she didn't realize that if she'd ever even harbored the slightest idea of holding a press conference, she would cut her own throat? She would end her career because that family was American
So
royalty.
powerful.
There's no
Yeah.
way she would have done it. Sinatra even said she was never going to do it because she had feelings still for
I
the
I was
head guy.
amused. Uh, Somebody approached her in a group situation and said, "Oh, your astrological sign, you're related to," and then they gave a list of just flighty, fluffy people. And she said, "Well, I don't know about that, but I'm also related to," and then she listed all these scientists and writers and great thinkers. That cracked me up.
Marilyn was very sophisticated. She even exchanged with a editor at the New York Times letters just talking about world affairs. She was genuinely interested. It didn't take Ralph Greenson by way of his son to pump her. Yeah, he gave her questions to ask the Attorney General. That was a setup so he could elicit information of interest to the Communist Party. But Marilyn also was genuinely interested in politics. She did, even when she was living in Connecticut, staying for a while with the family of her photographer friend, Milton Green. She was actually an alternate delegate at one point. So she took an active role in politics. This is not a newfound thing just because she met a famous politician.
It's interesting. I have heard people close to me, I won't name names, who, because of their particular bent, um, get very upset. Well, that movie star needs to shut his or her mouth. What are they doing giving opinions about politics? They need to stay in their own lane. And, I would argue that if you have a position of public recognition and you feel strongly about a moral stand, social justice, whatever, I think you're required to speak up and be an advocate for the vulnerable. And same is true for people I don't agree with. You
Yeah.
have the right. You have the right to speak out. This is a democracy. So it's interesting that she was involved in politics and would speak about it. I think that's
Yeah,
says good things.
and I want to make the point. I don't think, and I can't prove this, but I strongly suspect that Marilyn was unaware that her two doctors and her housekeeper were so involved, deeply involved in the Communist Party. Remember, this was at the height of the Cold War, and these guys were very furtive in their activities
They had to be.
to wet Engelberg's hidden room in his home.
Yeah.
But they weren't out there broadcasting and trying to recruit people publicly. I made the point, I think I made it in a previous conversation, that it was established that psychiatrist offices were a good sanctuary for the transmittal of important information between people who were loyal to the communist cause and the Communist Party because of the confidentiality
Yeah.
that surrounded psychiatrist offices.
Yeah.
So Greenson was in a perfect position to not only collect information without Marilyn even really necessarily knowing it, particularly if she was under the influence of hypnosis and or sodium pentothal, and convey it to, and transmit this through his psychiatric contacts.
There was a show recently. I don't remember. I forget. It doesn't matter. But that was exactly the premise. The guy would arrange meetings at his doctor's office because he had maybe it was The Sopranos.
Could be.
Yeah, he would. His doctor was in on it, and he would make an appointment, and then he'd get met, be able to have conversations in private. Okay, so let's see here. Where do we go? So she planned to fire Pat Newcomb. She actually told Henry Rosenfeld.
Yeah.
And as he the
and she told other people as well. She was getting rid of Eunice Murray, Ralph Greenson, and Pat Newcomb. And that's the reason she called George Barris, the photographer, on Friday, trying to get him to come out there.
And he couldn't.
This is probably before she summoned Pat Newcomb to come to her house.
Yeah.
Remind me to tell you why that happened. But she also called Rupert Allen, her former publicist, who was then representing Grace Kelly over in Monaco. But he was back in the States. He happened to be ill, so she didn't reach him. But she was going to try to hire somebody, and she thought George Barris, because he was not only a photographer, he also had a PR.
He was a PR guy, right?
He would replace Pat Newcomb. And she needed somebody quickly. That was the urgency behind her call on Friday afternoon to George Barris, trying to induce him to come out yet that weekend, because she was getting ready to can Pat Newcomb. And she needed somebody to replace her right away, because all this stuff was brewing, not only with the columns of Dorothy Kilgallen and Earl Wilson, but also there was trouble we haven't talked about with MCA. On July 13th, the Justice Department sued this entertainment giant, MCA, with an antitrust lawsuit that created upheaval. And there were people like Sidney Korshak, a mob lawyer that Marilyn went to see, who ironically was a friend of the family. Get that overlap. Even decorated, Sinatra's house. Here you got the family, including an AG that's prosecuting the mafia, and yet they're friends with the mafia lawyer. But anyway, MCA was a hot button item there that last summer, and Marilyn was feeling the heat on that. Shirley MacLaine even wrote in her book that Marilyn had been unhappy with MCA as her representatives, and she fired them and hired Mickey Root in January of '62. And people unfairly blame Marilyn for having complained to her boyfriend, quote unquote, the AG, and that's the reason he launched this antitrust lawsuit. That's bunk, because that investigation was underway even in the Eisenhower days, and it lapsed over to the next administration, whose name I just can't simply remember. But anyway, and so Marilyn had nothing to do with it. However, Ralph Roberts did say that Marilyn said that the AG had asked her to help him. And Ralph commented that she liked doing those sorts of things. She didn't start this, but of course, if the AG asked her something, that might prove helpful, she would be willing to kind of help. Because MCA, thanks to Ronald Reagan, who was in cahoots with them, and I'll be dealing with that in an upcoming book on Ronald Reagan. But anyway, Screen Actors Guild, all kinds of stuff on that. MCA was cornering the market on television production and everything else. They were just strangling Hollywood. There did need to be an antitrust lawsuit, but what do you think happened after Marilyn died? All of a sudden, there was this settlement of the MCA problem. Today, they're Universal, the Universal company. Lots of things.
Moving forward, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. It's incestuous. There's so much overlap. So Friday night, she got a delivery of food for this barbecue she was going to hold on Saturday.
She was going to be seen as director.
On Sunday.
The director, what's his name? Thompson. I think he was actually filming elsewhere, and he was going to be there and have, unfortunately he had a call on Saturday morning. There was some conflict. He was going to arrive the following Tuesday. So she had all this food on her hands. Some people said, oh, well, she bought the food because she knew she was going to see the AG. That is belied by the fact that she did nothing to fix herself up on that last day.
Yeah, no, there's all kinds of weird stuff that are contradictory on this day.
But she summoned Pat Newcomb to her on Saturday afternoon. Pat Newcomb even said she got a call from Marilyn. But it wasn't because Marilyn, I beg your pardon, it wasn't because Pat had bronchitis, the poor dear, and was so sick she was about ready to go to the hospital. According to Pat Newcomb's version, Marilyn wanted her to hang out at her house poolside and get sun. But if you look at any pictures of Pat Newcomb, she always had a perpetual tan. She didn't need to go to Marilyn's house to get that tan. And why on earth would Pat, if she was truly sick with an upper respiratory infection, go to Marilyn and infect her
Yeah, right
because
before a
Marilyn
movie.
was so
Yeah.
susceptible to getting upper respiratory and sinus infections. So,
As we go along, there's so much contradiction in what Pat Newcomb said about everything.
oh
But
my God, she was
okay,
there to address this problem. Those two women got together late in the afternoon on Friday to try to
to fight.
thrash out what to do
Yeah.
about this PR thing and what column is going to drop next with an implication. Inquiring minds would want to know who is this mysterious man that's alluded to 2 days in a row in these columns.
I don't know. I can't imagine. Jeffries was there on Saturday morning. He was doing tiling work for her. She was waiting for a delivery from the nursery for her yard. And then she got this surprise visit. And
Pilgrim Furniture Company. She'd actually gone shopping at Chest of Drawers.
right. But she got a surprise visit from the Playboy photographer. And Pat, she had told Pat Newcomb, I don't want to do that job. I don't need to make money or notoriety by doing a nude photographic spread.
Let's clarify this a little bit. Lawrence Schiller, who's still alive, was a photographer. He was one of two photographers, the other being Billy Woodfield, who were allowed on the closed set when Marilyn did a swim scene on her last film. She was discreetly photographed. Even when she disrobed, she was, they had a closed set and they took some bare shoulder kind of things, no nude shots of her, but they were interesting. They had combined resources instead of competing against each other and lowering the amount of money that Woodfield and Schiller could get for these photographs of Marilyn. They got together and decided they would jointly try to market them. They approached Hugh Hefner Playboy, and he had offered $25,000. But Marilyn was uncertain about it. Lawrence Schiller showed up unannounced, which is something you should never do at Marilyn's house, on Saturday morning, and she was outside in slacks and a blouse,
gardening,
kind of planting flowers. And she saw his car approached, and she looked like she was expecting somebody else, and she was surprised to see him. He was dropping off some photographs and some magazines on which she had appeared on the cover, including magazines around the world that contained photos that he had taken. She wasn't overly friendly, but he said, I got a phone call from Pat Newcomb last night saying that you don't want to do the photos or appear in Playboy. And Marilyn was rather sharp-tongued and said Pat wasn't authorized to make that call.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought Pat neglected to tell them not to come. Oh, okay.
Well,
all right.
Well,
sorry.
Pat probably did on her own initiative call.
Oh, okay.
But Marilyn didn't authorize her to do that, and she wanted to think about it. And she said, and she did make the comment, is that all I'm good for? So she was really of two minds, I grant you that. But she had not made an official decision, and hence Pat was not authorized to make that call to Lawrence Schiller. And so
Okay.
the way she left it with Lawrence was, I'll call you. I'll think about it and I'll call you. And she tried to kind of smooth things over. She probably felt that she'd come off a little too abrupt with him. So she gave him a tour of the recently completed guest cottage that, by the way, had a working bathroom, whereas the water was shut off in her bathroom.
Oh, because he was tiling it. Right.
Forensically important later.
Yeah. So,
and then he actually appeared before Ralph Roberts did, because Ralph Roberts was interviewed a few weeks after Marilyn's death. He was tracked down and interviewed and appeared in print saying that he had given a massage that last morning. It was an hour and a half that he was at Marilyn's house on Saturday morning. And he remembered her saying, it's so good to be laughing again. He said she was in better shape than in all the years he'd known her.
Yeah, my next sentence was Ralph Roberts.
I'm not trying to preempt you. I'm sorry.
No. I'm glad
I blurt these things out because otherwise, if I don't, I'm not going to remember to say them.
I know it's really difficult. It's difficult to keep track of all these characters and moving pieces. But he also said something I thought was interesting, that she was bright-eyed and alert and not under the influence of anything, and he saw no indication anywhere in the house of medication, pills.
Right. The police actually asked him, and there was no, he would have been alarmed. There were no, a whole bunch of pills on her bedside or whatever, nothing like that. And
And
he
then
just
of course,
remembered how, and she said, Pat's here. Maybe we can have a barbecue later if Pat stays, meaning Saturday night. Ralph did a lot of cooking, and he didn't do it with a gas grill like people do today or whatever. They would do it with charcoal briquettes out on her patio. She had a lovely patio around her pool area, and very nice furniture, poolside furniture. And she liked having people come over. Her little dog Matt was there, and so that was possible. And he actually called her around 6 p.m. to ask if she still wanted to do that. He was at Jernigan's to buy the steaks. So she had plans that last day.
yeah, and then of course you mentioned Thompson called her and canceled for Sunday.
Yeah.
Plans for Sunday. There was something that I wasn't, maybe I was just tired, but I didn't get the story straight. Pat Newcomb causes me endless trouble because she lies and she gives other stories, and I can't keep track.
She's still alive. She's 96 and still has lawyers, Helen, but we'll say it's alleged. But yeah.
Well, no, because there's proof that she gave opposing stories on the record in official documents. So one of those is untrue. They can't both be true. They're mutually exclusive, right? She had a big fight with Marilyn, and
yeah, she admits that.
Pardon me?
She admits that. Even on Friday night, she had a fight with her.
Right. And did she sleep over Friday night?
Yes.
Okay. So she was there in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Well, she slept until noon.
Well.
And her stories have changed. The original story was that she had. I mean? Am I getting ahead of you?
No, I'm just see what I mean. I mean, the timelines are contradictory. Right. Yes, she did. Yes, she didn't. She tells different stories.
The initial reports from Newcomb and Eunice Murray was that as the day progressed, that Marilyn and Pat Newcomb had dinner, and then Newcomb left on a date. For a date.
With?
Not with somebody that showed up at the house, but unnamed person running.
Yeah.
Then it became 7 o'clock. Then it was changed again. And by the time she was interviewed by another author, she left at 3 p.m. Well, that's convenient because then she doesn't have to be questioned about the appearance of the Attorney General at Marilyn's house in the afternoon. But right. I feel confident in saying that Pat Newcomb was there when the AG and Peter Lawford showed up at Marilyn's house unannounced around 4 o'clock that afternoon, Saturday, August 4th.
She got her furniture delivered. She got her plants delivered. Right. She fired Eunice, and she told Eunice be gone by the end of the day.
Yes.
And Eunice went in and told, unknown to Marilyn, told her son-in-law, and then went and called the Dr. Greenson, which I thought was interesting.
Well, she was fired kind of earlier in the afternoon, and Eunice called Greenson then to try to get him to come over because she'd just been canned, but he refused to do so. She actually called Greenson twice
earlier. Oh, okay. See,
before and after the AG's visit.
Marilyn called New York to talk to Hattie, her help in New York, to see if she could get her to come take Eunice's place. So that legitimizes the story that she did indeed fire Eunice.
And that was under court testimony when they were dealing with estate matters. Hattie Stevenson, one of her maids, and then she had another one also. She actually asked two of them. One could not relocate to the West Coast. The other one could. Hattie Stevenson did show up at Marilyn's funeral, however. But anyway, that was in the works. And you can see how this is all crystallizing, I think. She was going to replace Pat Newcomb with George Barris, most likely.
Right.
That's why she called him. And she had called both of her maids in New York. They kind of took turns to get one of them to replace Eunice Murray. It's all lining up. She had been talking to Margaret Hohenberg by phone, her psychiatrist from early on in New York. That was replacing Greenson.
And she had a big blow up on the phone with the Strasbergs. And
right.
That's the thing. And she was clearing the decks.
Part of the reason for that is that the terms of her rehiring included, from the studio, including her getting rid of Pat Newcomb, Ralph Greenson, who had been horning in, and Paula Strasberg.
Yeah, who was just a
And
pain.
on Thursday of that week, I think, well, I don't know if we mentioned that she called Paula. Of course, she put her on a plane on Monday, but called her and basically told her she couldn't use her in the upcoming film.
Yeah, they had a big blow up.
They
Yeah.
had a blow up, but Marilyn could use the excuse that she would not be rehired without getting rid of the 3 people that I just.
Right, she could blame the studio. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So then, in the middle of all this chaos, her car was being fixed. It got dropped off. So in the middle of all this
Eunice's car.
going, I'm worn
Eunice's
out
car.
talking about it. Pardon?
Eunice's car. Marilyn didn't have a car.
Oh, Eunice's car. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What happened to her car that, was it Jack Benny gave her a car?
Yeah, but that was in 1955.
Oh, well, you know, time has no meaning.
Nobody knows this, but the guy that Robert Wagner bought it.
Oh my God! Now there's a case.
Now Marilyn, when she induced, Ralph was tied up a little bit in the first part of the year.
We have 1 minute, so I want to give this a solid ending.
Okay.
That we can continue.
Time is flying here.
I know. So enter Peter Lawford and his friend, the AG. So now we're ready to talk about things heating up at her house. And this is a good place to stop in the narrative. Okay. Yes. And we will continue. We're going to do more. We'll have to negotiate
if people have any hesitation, they need to watch that next one. I'm going to give it super billing because we're going to go into what happened minute by minute.
By minute, absolutely. I've done my best, and I know that you'll flesh it out well. And so let me stop now. The rush to stop this is I can have shorts automatically made, and they do call attention to these videos and help people to find out about them. I can't technologically depend on myself to make a short to save my own life. So we're trying to stick with the time. I will be back with Larry, and we'll continue this very sad story very soon. And thank you so much for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, and thank you, Larry.
Good to see you.
Slanga for Slanja.